the Gospels and ethics. And so we begin this evening, and if you've got a copy of the handout, you might look at those first two questions. I was even asked this evening if I was going to get political, and I think someone looked at the word ethical, and their brain kind of made a connection there to political. Well, that's yet to be determined, whether I'm going to get political or not. I don't think so tonight per se, but you never know, and someone can take things in different ways. But what do we mean by the word gospels? Gospels. Good news. It wasn't too long ago, it was actually back in December of last year, that we looked at some things in the Gospels and we talked about them, how they've developed, that term. And you've got 4 books in the Bible that we call the Gospels. And those have become a genre almost of writing in Scripture. But their original titles, we even noted then, were the Gospel according to. And so they were always about the gospel, the good news about Jesus. Just 4 different takes on it. Not that they are different in a contradictory sense, but giving us some different angles for consideration. And so as we think about the Gospels tonight, that's what we're thinking of. The first parts of what we call the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those 4 documents that take us back to Jesus and His ministry, His teachings while on this earth. Gospels. And then ethics. Ethics. Often associated with another term, morality or morals. Ethics is suggested as maybe even a more accurate term to describe right and wrong. Ethics is about the way that I live within that category. How much of my life is how things should be, and well, then how much of my life is how things shouldn't be. It's possible that morality, you can view it as somewhat of just how things are. Here's the state of morality in America. People say that. I guess I'm getting political a little bit. But ethics is really focused in on what actually is right. How should I really live my daily life when I face those decisions? We mentioned this morning, right and wrong decisions. That's ethics in a nutshell. So you put the two together tonight, and our task, my task as I lead us, is looking through the gospel accounts and seeing what we might glean about ethics, about living. It might be said that we are occasionally really quick to go to the letters. And I'm right there with you. I'm a big fan of Paul's writings, Peter's, James. Talk about ethics, a lot of ethics. James is rich with ethics. But what if we went back as Jesus people, both in the sense of people who belong to Jesus possessive, but a people who were supposed to be described that way. We're like Jesus. We're Jesus people. We're kingdom people. Let's go back to the gospel accounts about Jesus and see what we might learn about ethics. There's a lot. You might notice that third phrase, or first phrase after the 2 questions. There's a lot of ethical teachings, both by Jesus' example and by His direct words. A lot of different topics are covered. Now, I don't expect you to want to look at all of those tonight. So what we have before us are 3 highlights, 3 key themes in the 4 Gospels about our ethics as disciples of Jesus, drawn from the way He lived and the way He taught. They are, in this order for this evening, the cross, which is the basis, it's like the foundation of it all, source that our ethics should grow out of, the cross. And then secondly, compassion. I'm sorry, there are a few of those big words that you're going to have to fill in tonight without screen help, but figure it out, and if you don't, Google it, I guess, or something, all right, or make it up. But compassion is the second one. And it's like the heart. Ethics with compassion is like the heart of who we are, who we're supposed to be. Ethics is how things are supposed to be. And then we'll close this evening by considering how our ethical lives are lived in community. Community. And I didn't mean for those 3 words to all start with C. Maybe it's subconscious. I think that does happen for me sometimes. But it just as I was studying through the Gospels and reading through them in preparation for this evening, before I knew it, those were the three key themes that developed. Cross, the basis, compassion, like a heart with compassion as we live, and then in community, like this, it's the setting or the environment where this is to be focused. And if that doesn't make a lot of sense yet, hopefully it will here in just a few minutes. Let's begin then with the cross. The cross. It's the basis of our ethical lives, our ethics. Let's turn together to Luke chapter 9. Could put a marker in Luke chapter 9 because so much of this comes out of Luke 9 or is found in Luke 9. There's going to be occasions where we'll use portions of Luke 9 more as a cross-reference on some of the things in the handout. But I almost just stayed in Luke 9 tonight. I made it a study of Luke 9. We didn't do that, but you could do that. Begin with me in Luke chapter 9, verses 21 and 22. The cross, his own cross. 3 times in this chapter, we are reminded that Jesus has a mission that is about the cross. It's about crucifixion. Luke chapter 9, verses 21 and 22. He strictly charged and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, "The Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised." And then you drop down to Luke chapter 9, verse 44. It says, while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus says to his disciples, "Let these words sink into your ears." Now, Luke's going to say they don't get it, so that sinking in part here doesn't happen. But he says, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. And then the third one is in verse 51. It's this little note about Jesus' travel plans. Luke 9:51 says, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And that becomes an umbrella for the rest of Luke. Everything else Luke writes is written under, even though he doesn't immediately go as quickly as he can to Jerusalem, the rest of his travels, the rest of his ministry is with Jesus set on Jerusalem as the final destination. He's just making his way to Jerusalem because it's time for him to be taken up. And that you can take that as taken into the hands of men. You can take that as taken up or lifted up on cross. You've heard it before that Jesus came to die. He came to do a lot of things. He did a lot of things. But he came to die. He came to give himself as the sacrificial lamb. He came to serve, but he came to lay down his life. That mindset, that sacrificing, that willingness to do whatever it takes to help somebody, and we're almost trivializing it, right? But that kind of thinking is at the heart of what it means to belong to Jesus, to follow Jesus. How do I know that? We'll go back to Luke chapter 9, verse 23. We left off, we read 21 and 22. Here's where we might call it his way. His way. And if you wanted to add a couple of lines there, you could say his way for me. His way for us as his people, as those that would be disciples. Luke 9:23, he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself. He gives some steps here, a process. You want to follow me? Deny yourself and take up his cross. Luke is the one who includes him saying daily. That's why we're reading, partly why we're reading Luke 9 and not Matthew 16 or Mark 8 tonight as parallels. He says, do this daily and then follow me. Whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. It is quite the demand, isn't it? And we undermine this. Over the centuries, we read this passage and we think about our cross to bear. And we make our cross to bear. We might make it an employer, or maybe as an employer, we make it a certain employee. They're my cross I've got to bear. Or maybe our spouse. And maybe it's some personal defeat in life. We go through something and things don't work out, and we say, well, this is just my cross to bear. But Jesus, in his context, he's just talked about his own actual cross. Think about it. If you're the disciples, even though they're not getting this fully, what all this means and that this is really going to happen, the context is, I'm about to be delivered and they're going to crucify me. Oh, and by the way, if you want to be my disciple, you want to follow me, you want to have ethics like me, you got to take up your cross. In its setting, the cross is about extreme sacrifice, about humiliation, about pain to follow Jesus. And you put that with the deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me, and it makes being a disciple of Jesus an all or nothing proposal. Somebody compared it to swimming. You're in the swimming pool, and if you don't know how to swim, if you get in the pool, you just stand on the bottom of the pool. And I know a particular kiddo that kind of likes to do that. And you say, well, you're not going to drown, obviously, so why don't you just pick your feet up, start kicking your feet a little bit, and at least trying to learn to swim? Yes or no? Or is this a yes? I don't know if it's a yes or no question or not, come to think of it. But are you ever going to learn to, it's yes or no, are you ever going to learn to swim if you keep standing with your feet on the bottom of the pool? Shake or nod, yes or no? No. And if the water does get higher to where it's above your head, well, at that point you got to do what? Sink or swim. Yeah, you got to swim or you're going to drown. Isn't that the call here from Jesus? It's an all-in call. You've got to look at being my disciple like you've denied yourself, like you've died, you've been crucified, and your life is over, and now you've got a new life as my disciple. If you're all about trying to save your life and make the best of this world and worldly things, keep reading, right? What do you value your soul? It's not going to work. It's going to work. And instead, we talk about our little crosses to bear. When he's talking about giving ourselves totally to him, that everything is on the line. I'm giving it all in a sense away, or I'm giving it all to you, Jesus. My life, everything I am, totally devoted to you. And that becomes his challenge then. So hold your place in Luke 9. Go with me to Matthew chapter 10. Look at Matthew chapter 10. As already said, Matthew 16 is the same setting and then the same time when he talks about taking up your cross and following him. But Matthew records Jesus saying this earlier. Matthew chapter 10, we'll begin at verse 34 and read through 38. 39 we've already read from Luke's account, and so we won't read that here. He says, "Do not think that I came to bring peace to the earth," as if that would be the expectation of the Messiah. And there's a sense in which he did, but here he's making a different point. I didn't come to bring peace, he says, but a sword. I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And then, he says, and whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Now, Jesus is not against the family unit. In fact, we could go to other places in his teachings and throughout the Scriptures to see that would quickly be problematic to take from this. He's not telling you to just make your own way and be rebellious and against people. So what is he saying? That this call, this way of cross living is going to create differences. And there will be people that may even be in our own family that won't like that. Here's a good example from recent times. You ever seen someone who decides to become a Christian? They decide to be baptized into Jesus. And it might be that their parents, it might be that other people in their family make it an ultimatum for them. It's all or nothing. You do this and we're done. Don't come home. Don't expect to be invited to Christmas dinner. You're disowned. There's just one way that happens even in our world, in our time. We don't tend to see it as severely as it has happened in history and sometimes does happen around the world, where people will kill other members of their own physical family because they became a Christian. This pulls this to the bottom line here. That any other loyalty, any other pull on my life, my affections, my love, has to take a back seat at best to my allegiance, my love, my affection, I'm going to follow Jesus. And then I put a period right there. Doesn't matter. That's the challenge. I think the story has been told here, but I think it's at least been a while, so I'm going to retell it. But it's the collector. He's collected all sorts of different antiques, unique art. He has to build a large warehouse just to put all of his collection. And one day he comes across this unique cross. It is gigantic. It is a one-of-a-kind cross. And the man has some religious connotation to him, and so that also has an appeal, but it's also just that it's unique and it's so big and he's got to have it. And so he buys it, has it shipped home in this, in a large, pays the freight and everything to get it shipped to his home. And then there's a problem. It won't fit. Not that it won't fit in the warehouse. He has these big swinging doors. Still won't fit. It won't go in the doors. And his employees come to him with this dilemma. What do you want us to do? It's the dilemma. Do you cut open the warehouse more? Or do you trim the cross? How does this model of cross and sacrifice and total giving myself to Jesus, how does that change my life daily? Is it possible that I might be trimming the cross, making it a bit softer, instead of opening up my heart and life for the challenge of a Savior who said, if you want to follow me, you're either all in or you're not with me at all. That's tough. But that's where my life as a Christian is based. Cross. It's how Jesus becomes king, is through death and, yes, resurrection and ascension. And you see those two themes in the Gospels, don't we? The cross, his suffering, and his kingdom, his kingship. Maybe it shouldn't surprise me that kingdom living is cross-shaped. The cross. But let's see more of what that looks like. The second category tonight is with compassion. Compassion. I'm going to read something to you. I suppose I should have printed this out or something, or put it on my phone so it would be, maybe the approach would work better. I mean, obviously I'm reading from the Scriptures. But for once, I'm not going to give you the reference. I just want to read this with you, to you. See what you think. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, stripped him and beat him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But, and some of you can guess the rest of this one, but a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. Now there's a clue here about seeing. You've got to see the person in their pain, and sometimes we don't do that much. We're too busy, we're too fast, we're too focused on what we're about. But even seeing is not enough, isn't it? It's to see, and then how I see, I feel something. Compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds. He doesn't just give him some pithy words or pouring oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animals, talk about the sacrifices, and brought him to an inn. I don't know if it was 106 or not, but he brings him to the inn on his own animal. And he gives the innkeeper money, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay when I come back. Which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus says, you go and do likewise. Who is that? Jesus is telling the story. Okay, we get that. What parable is this that he tells the man seeking to justify himself before Jesus? Yeah. It's the what? The Good Samaritan. Question number 2 then. Where is that? We're in Luke 10, if you want to double check me. Luke 10, 25 and following. Where is the word good? Unless I've missed something, it's not there. Now, the point is not that we need to rename the parable. I mean, that'd be okay. That's not the point. The point is that over the years, as humans and as Christians, then, we get the fact that regardless of anything else we know about how to live, regardless of anything else we know about this passage, what that man did, going across the differences, is good. It's good. It's a compassion that relies on the other person's pain or problems, despite our differences, whether we're enemies, whether I don't know you, whether I don't really like you, whether it's going to be uncomfortable and inconvenient to help you. It's compassion. That's the funny thing about words, isn't it? Sometimes words aren't used, but the meaning is there. Here's another example, and now we're back to the outline. Mark chapter 10, verse 45. We see a suffering, serving, I got those backwards, but you get the idea, Savior. It's been submitted as the theme verse of Mark. That the Son of Man did not come to be served himself, but to serve and to give his life a ransom. So serving and then sacrificing, suffering. How many times does Mark use the word love? Love. Might be something to take note of this evening that Mark only uses the word love in one passage. It's not Mark 10. If you want to write it down, it's not in the outline because it's just an example, but it's Mark 12. When Jesus answers the question about the greatest commandment, and it's to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Only time. The other 3 writers use love quite a bit by comparison. Mark rarely, almost never uses it. He never uses it to describe Jesus. But you read through Mark, and you realize the emphasis is different. He uses the word compassion a lot. But what is that? It's love. Mercy. We see Jesus having compassion on the leper in Mark 1. We see him having compassion on the boy, the young man that's demon-possessed, on Bartimaeus in his blindness. And right in the middle of that, we see Jesus having compassion on the crowds. That's Mark 6, verse 34. When he looks and how they're like sheep without a shepherd. And so he begins to teach them, even though he's worn out. He has compassion. Or it's back in Luke 9, 11 through 17, when the crowds are following and listening, and they're hungry. And the disciples say, hey, we need to feed them. And he says, you give them something to eat. In the end, he miraculously provides. And it's a sign of his power, it's a sign of his provision, but it's also a sign of his compassion. The example of ethics from Jesus at its heart, and we literally mean heart, we mean feeling and compassion, is this behavior that says, I look at people's needs, and if I can help in some way, do that. We have a bad habit of this, and I'm right there with you. We ask people, well, do you need something? We say, if you need something, just give me a call. I'm not saying that's wrong to do. That's good. But if I see something, I might need to just take care of it within reason, of course. He has compassion for the crowds. And then to make sure this isn't just Jesus tonight, what about Matthew 25? A big test. I believe that's the word there, a major test. It's major because Jesus makes it a matter of everlasting life or everlasting punishment. That's the very last verse of Matthew 25. Matthew 25:46. That's right after he looks at the sheep and the goats. And for this passage, the difference is about how they showed compassion in various ways. Whether it was providing a meal for someone, visiting someone in prison, whatever it was, they tended to needs. They treated other people, as Jesus puts it here, like they were taking care of Jesus. There's something about heart of compassion that is essential to the ethical life that Jesus calls us to. Cross is the basis. No wonder then that compassion, serving, helping people, feeling with and for people, and acting on that is at the heart of this ethical life. Now the third one that we'll close with this evening is community. Community. This morning, three of our ladies were walking down the ramp here together, and I approached them saying, well, and I'm not sure what else to say beyond that. And then a comment was made, and they didn't know they were going to change my illustration for tonight. A comment was made about how 3 chords are stronger than 1. Well, I had something planned about snow, and I was already debating it because I thought, I don't know, do people want to hear about snow in the middle of August? They might be encouraged by thinking about the prospect of that, or they might be discouraged by, well, we aren't going to see that for quite a while, maybe, it feels like. But you think about one strand of thread or yarn in this case. It's not that much to it. Not that strong. Now, as I said this morning, I've been missing my workout, so I'm not going to try to demonstrate breaking it tonight in the sermon. That might be an utter failure. But it's not that difficult to break one strand. But then you have someone take this that knows what they're doing, not me, obviously, and they weave it into fabric. And it might not be the strongest material ever, but it's a lot stronger, a lot more useful, isn't it? Jesus doesn't call us to a deserted island discipleship where you come, you deny yourself, you take up your cross, and you follow me, and it's just you and me. It's just Jesus and you. Throughout even his earthly ministry, there's always this idea that he's calling disciples to be together in community. That's the focus setting. That doesn't mean, as we were even saying, that we don't reach out to people on the outside of that community. The community is meant to expand, right? Limited commission, great commission that the Gospels end with. But to borrow from Paul, it's especially the household of faith. So read and consider these passages. I played with the wording because it made it easy to remember. And if that works for you, great. If it doesn't, you change the outline with different synonyms. But he calls us to loving unity. Look at John chapter 13. John 13, and we're going to be in 17, so that makes it easy there. John 13, 34 and 35. As he's having this last supper with the disciples, he tells them, here's a key indicator of who you are. Community, loving unity. It's how you love each other, how you treat one another. John 13, 34, he says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. And then right with that, in his high priestly prayer in John 17, 20 through 23, he prays about those disciples and more to come, and he prays about unity. loving unity then. John 17, I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. They may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you. They also may be one, may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. Something about the way we love one another and the way we work together and are willing to come from all of our differences, our backgrounds, our differences of opinion, and not that we lose our unique personalities, but that we're able to find a way in Jesus, in His cross, in compassion, to work together in unity, to not chew each other up, and as Paul would say, to not eat on each other and consume each other with our words, to find a way to be in harmony, that plays a role in those who aren't yet Christians believing in Jesus, loving unity. And then there's a kind of humility at work. There's a kind of service that we are intended to share with each other as we work together within this community. Look with me at Matthew 18. Matthew 18, verses 15 and following. We're not going to finish the passage tonight. And I realize I just skipped over the serving humility part. All right, so there's that. I'll let you consider. But let's close tonight with the forgiving accountability. I say forgiving because the rest of this chapter is about forgiving one another from the heart when you're done wrong. But the first part is how this community is meant to hold each other accountable for their wrong. And I'm not sure if this might be one of those passages that we tend to kind of skim over and skip over. Here's what he says, Matthew 18:15 and following. He says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. And then this line about how you approach this process of reconciliation. He says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them. These are 3 parts of what it means to live life in this community of people. We're not just individual disciples who were called and come and sit on some pews on a Sunday evening. We're meant to be something more than that. Meant to be a community or a family of people where we love one another so to such an extent that people take notes. Where we're willing to have the humility to serve one another. And it's not about being the greatest. It's about being servants. And where when someone does wrong, we're within a community of love and care and compassion, where we're even willing to hold another person accountable for their sin, for their life within this community. Here's 3, what did we call them? Key themes for life, for ethics in the Gospels. It all starts with the cross. It's cross-shaped, or that's the basis for everything. And then it flows out with a heart of compassion for people who are hurting. And then it is meant to be focused, the setting for that is meant to be focused in community, in a group of people who all have followed, have answered, and now follow the call. Take up their cross and follow Jesus. Will I follow Jesus like that this week? How will that change my lifestyle this week? Am I willing to do what Jesus calls me to be as His disciple? Gary's going to lead us in a song of invitation, an invite from Jesus to come and bring your life to Him, to come and realize, yes, in one way, I give everything to follow Jesus. But in reality, I'm the one who is gaining everything because of what Jesus means, because of the hope I have in Him. Let's stand together and sing.